The Hand of the Necromancer by Brad Strickland, Chapter 6. For a couple of weeks, Johnny heard no more news of either the wizard Blackleech or the sinister Mr. Myrtle. June ended and July came in with hot days and muggy warm nights. More and more, Mrs. Farrington relied on Johnny to do little things at the museum. She hated to be there on Monday afternoons when deliveries came, and Johnny always had the little extra job of waiting in the echoing, deserted museum for an hour or two. He would unlock the back door, store the supplies away, and leave the key on Miss Farrington's desk before leaving. He always remembered to check the front door, which locked behind him, and he never had any trouble. Johnny introduced Professor Childermass to Sarah with a little fear and trembling. The professor could be rude and scary when he was upset or preoccupied, although Johnny knew he had a warm heart. He need not have worried, because the professor could also be a real charmer when he chose. The old man was delighted to make Sarah's acquaintance, especially when she agreed with him that the Red Sox didn't deserve their fourth-place standing, but had suffered from a run of bad umpires. In turn, Sarah liked Professor Childermass because he didn't treat her like a child, but listened to her opinions as if they really mattered. The three of them didn't go to the movies or gorge on hot fudge sundaes the way Johnny Fergie and the professor did, but their talks were cordial and interesting. Independence Day was a holiday for Johnny. At first, it didn't seem as if the day would be very exciting. Grandma and Grandpa were planning to drive over to Lowell on the 4th to visit Grandma's sister Martha. She was younger than Grandma and had a house full of antiques and a deep distrust of young active boys. Whenever Johnny was there, Great Aunt Martha made him sit very still in an armchair the whole time, so he wouldn't break any of her precious keepsakes. It wasn't much fun. So Johnny was glad when the professor invited him and Sarah to a cookout instead. Normally, Professor Childermass asked his friends over to his weedy, overgrown backyard for hot dogs and hamburgers once or twice a year. This time, however, he suggested that it might be nice to picnic in the park on the east side of Dustin Heights. The trip to the park would be a bit of an expedition, but the professor's terrific hamburgers would make the effort worthwhile. He added his own secret ingredients to the ground beef, then cooked the burgers over a charcoal fire that had to be just right. The results were always juicy and delicious. On Monday morning, which was the 4th, the professor packed everything in his maroon Pontiac, and he, Johnny, and Sarah left for the park in a cloud of exhaust smoke. They arrived early enough to claim one of the stone grills and a picnic table on the shady side of the park. The professor insisted that he needed privacy to prepare the charcoal and begin the hamburgers, so he ordered Johnny and Sarah to find something to occupy them. Sarah had brought her bat, ball, and glove, and Johnny had a floppy old fielder's glove that had once belonged to his dad. They planned to play flies and grounders, but a bunch of boys were playing baseball, so Johnny and Sarah walked over to see if they could join in. Some of the kids in town were beginning to realize that Sarah was no slouch as a baseball player. They were in luck, sort of. Tim Jacobs was the captain of the team, and as soon as he saw them, he yelled, "We got Sarah!" Unfortunately, their luck ran out with that, because the leader of the team at bat was Eddie Tompke. Excuse me. A boy who had made Johnny's life miserable at every Boy Scout meeting. Eddie was a muscular, handsome kid, but he had a long-standing grudge against Johnny. Until the previous year, they had been in the same class at school, but Eddie wasn't a very good student and had been left back. He pretended that it didn't bother him, but he always pestered Johnny, calling him a brown nose and a teacher's pet and playing all sorts of mean tricks on him at scout meetings. Eddie scowled and yelled, "No way you get her if we got to take Four Eyes. So the girl can't play." "Hey, we'll take him too," Tim said. "That'll give us 8 players on a side, so it's fair. Sarah, you take shortstops. Johnny, you play right field, okay?" Johnny knew very well that right field was where they stuck you when you weren't any good. He tugged the tattered fielder's glove on and trotted out to right field, his head down and his mind full of worries. Would he foul up and make a costly error? What would happen if a high fly smacked him in the face, broke his glasses, and sent sharp pieces of glass into his eyes? He might be permanently blinded. But when he turned, Sarah gave him a cheerful wave, and he returned it. "Might as well go down swinging," he muttered, hoping he could get through the game without disgracing himself. Sarah took her position as shortstop and crouched over. Tim was pitching. They tossed the ball around the infield, and then they settled down to the game. The first batter was tall and solid and looked as if he could hit, but Tim's fastball was singing, and after 2 pitches, the count was 0-2. Johnny studied the batter for a moment, and then Tim studied the batter for a moment, and then he wound up and threw his famous curve. It broke exactly right, and the batter swung around like a gate, clearly missing the ball. 3 strikes and you're out of there, crowed Pete Freeling, the catcher, tossing the ball back to Tim. 1 down and 2 to go. Attaboy, Timmy. The game was fun. After 5 innings, Eddie's team was ahead 5-3. Johnny had batted twice. The first time, he popped up a foul that Eddie caught, and the second time, he went down swinging, but that was no disgrace. Many on both teams had done the same. In fact, in the top of the 6th, Tim easily struck out the first 2 batters. Next at bat was a scowling Eddie Tompke. He pounded his bat on the plate. Tim tried an outside pitch, but Tompke just frowned. "Ball 1, Timo," Eddie said with a sneer. You gonna walk me, you big fat chicken?" "Come on, Tim, he can't hit," Sarah yelled. "Strike him out, baby." Tim looked mad. Eddie had been yelling insults and laughing at every mistake Tim made. He could really get on a pitcher's nerves. Tim pitched a fastball and Eddie swung. Johnny heard the crack of the bat. For a moment, he couldn't even see the ball. Then he had it, a blurred streak in the sky. It was going high and far, and it was coming his way. Johnny backpedaled desperately. The center fielder was hustling over, but he was going to be too late. The ball was already hurtling down. Gritting his teeth, running backwards, Johnny threw his gloved hand up. With a stinging slap, the ball smacked into his worn glove and stayed there. The astonishing fact that he had caught a high-fly ball hit deep to right field practically dazed Johnny. He held the ball up and felt a big goofy grin spread across his face. Pete jumped 2 feet in the air behind home plate and screamed, "Way to go, my man, John! Yee-haw!" It all happened a lot faster than Johnny thought. Though Eddie was a good base runner, he was only about halfway to first. He stumbled to a stop, his eyes wide and unbelieving, and when he saw that Johnny really had caught the ball, he cursed and threw his cap on the ground. "We're up to bat," Tim yelled, dropping his glove and trotting in. "Come on, guys. We're 2 down. Let's get even." Jimmy King, a tough kid who was a grade ahead of Johnny at St. Michael's, came out to the pitcher's mound, and Johnny tossed the ball to him. Eddie, still standing near first base, sneered at Johnny. "Guess you think you're pretty hot stuff because you caught 1 measly ball, huh, Four Eyes? Just you wait. We're going to fix you losers good. We're going to pound you right into the ground." Sarah tugged Johnny's arm. "Don't pay him any attention," she said. "He just wants to make you feel mad so you can't hit anything." "Oh, great," Eddie said. "Get this, guys. Weird Sarah and Johnny baby are in love. You gonna kiss her, Johnny baby?" Eddie put his hands on his hips, smacking his pursed lips. "Oh, shut up, Eddie," Johnny said. "Don't let him get to you," Tim said as Johnny came up to the rest of the team. "That was a good catch, Johnny. Eddie's just mad because he's usually a lot harder to put out. Okay, let's get a couple of runs now." Eddie played first base. Tim was at bat first. But when he lined up a pretty good hit, the left fielder caught it on a bounce and tossed it to Eddie, putting Tim out a step before he reached first. Without any reason for doing it, Eddie slammed the ball against Tim's shoulder. Johnny winced at the sharp sound of the ball thudding into Tim's upper arm. Tim turned, glared at Eddie, and trotted back, massaging his shoulder. "We got him," Eddie yelled in derision. "They ain't nothing but a bunch of babies and girls in love." "Darn that Tompke anyway," Eddie grumbled. "He's going to pick on the wrong guy someday and get his big fat block knocked off. Go ahead, Sarah. Don't let him make you mad." Sarah was a switch hitter, and this time she batted left. On the pitcher's mound, Johnny looked a little worried because Sarah had been in several games by this time, and everyone knew she was good with a bat. She took 2 balls before Johnny tried 1 in the strike zone. She swung level and fast, and the ball sprang away with a crack. It was a whistling line drive to the left of second base, and it hit the ground, bounced, and kept going as 2 players chased madly after it. Sarah rounded first and pounded into second before the ball came back. Eddie stomped around on first base and cursed some more. "Go on, Johnny," Tim said, patting him on the back. "Get us a hit." Johnny batted right-handed. He pushed his glasses up to his nose, choked up on the bat, and held it away from his shoulder as Sarah had advised, trying hard to stay calm. He was thinking furiously of everything Sarah had taught him. If only he could get a hit, that would be really something. Looking a lot more relaxed now that he was pitching to Johnny. Timmy threw a fast one, and Johnny swung hard, connecting only with air. Johnny's heart sank. Who was he kidding? He'd never get a hit off Jimmy, not in a million years. The miserable little blooper he had hit in the second inning was the best he would ever do. Oh, he could occasionally hit them when Sarah pitched, but she was babying him along. The second pitch streaked in, and this time Johnny tipped it foul. He could feel his face growing hot. Well, he might go down swinging, but at least he could try to do what Sarah had taught him. He cocked the bat and felt strangely calm as Jimmy wound up and threw for a third time. The pitch came in fast and a little high, shoulder level, and Johnny knew he had it even before he began to swing. With a solid thunk, he connected, sending a bouncing ground ball right to the shortstop. Johnny was already running, knowing it was hopeless. But the ball took a screwy hop right over the shortstop's glove as Eddie screamed something nasty. The flustered infielder awkwardly scooped the ball up and turned toward third base. That was the right move, but Eddie yelled for the ball. The shortstop looked his way, then back at third base, and then back at Eddie. By the time he made up his mind, Johnny had stepped on first base. Eddie screamed, and the shortstop glowered, but the play stood. Johnny was on first, Sarah on third. It was Johnny's first base hit ever in a real game. Tim's team was leaping up and down and cheering. Tim's team was hot. The next kid got a single, but the center fielder quickly scooped up the ball, threw it to second base, and Johnny was out. On the play at second, Sarah scored a run. Johnny trudged back with his head down. "Sorry, guys," he said dismally. With a laugh, Tim slapped him on the shoulder again. "For what? You put Sarah into position to score. And we got an out left to go. Batter up." Their luck held, and the next batter slammed a home run. Paul Deacon struck out. But by then, nobody cared, because now the team was ahead by one, and Eddie was almost purple with anger. As the teams changed sides, Professor Childermass's voice boomed across the park. "Lunch is now served. Mr. Dixon and Miss Channing are to report to the chow line on the double, or I'll throw it all out." "Go on," Tim said with a grin. The way Eddie's screaming at his guys, I don't think the game's going to last any longer. Thanks, both of you. Tim was right. 3 of Eddie's players were already walking off in disgust because Eddie was blaming them for falling behind. The game was going to end with Tim's team up by 1, but Eddie got in a parting shot. "Go to the oddball, you babies. Go to the old oddball, you babies," he yelled. "Next time I catch you alone, you're in trouble. Dixon, I'm going to stomp you." Even Eddie's mean-spirited taunts failed to make Johnny feel bad. He grinned at Sarah and shrugged, and she giggled. It was shaping up to be the best day Johnny had seen since Fergie left for Ohio. If only it could have gone on like that, he would have been very happy. That's the end of chapter 6. Not a baseball fan. The Aunt Martha bit was a little bit like something out of Leave It to Beaver. This is Brad Strickland and not John Belair's. Sorry for editorializing, but I hope we have some good spooky fun in chapter 7.